O'Hare Airport, Chicago, 1973. John picked up his duffel bag from the luggage carousel. The flight from Toronto had been bumpy. It wasn't long before that he'd been tricked into auditioning for the Second City improv troupe by his friends Valerie Bromfield and Dan Aykroyd. Theater director and guru of improvisational comedy Del Close had liked John so much from that audition that he invited the boy from East York to do comedy in Chicago. John was to join the Second City main stage, standing in for Brian Doyle Murray, as he traveled to Toronto to help the new Canadian company off its feet. And now, there John found himself in the Windy City. As he moved his way through the airport, a customs agent waved him over. John approached the desk with a huge grin spread across his face. He had never really traveled outside of Toronto before. This was all new and exciting to him.
How you doing?
John said, as he let his duffel bag fall off his shoulder and settle at his feet. The customs agent eyeballed him. He clocked his long, shaggy hair and his seemingly soft, doughy exterior, not appreciating the strength contained within. Not long before this, U.S. President Gerald Ford had signed a proclamation granting conditional amnesty for those who fled to Canada to avoid the Vietnam draft.
The program provides for administrative disposition of cases involving draft evaders and military deserters.
Since then, long-haired hippie types had been streaming back over the border.
Business or pleasure?
John wasn't sure what to say. He was there to work, but the folks at Second City had told him not to mention it, in case they wanted him to produce a work visa.
Why are you entering the United States?
Don't say work, John told himself.
Pleasure.
He had only packed clothes enough for a couple weeks, if he turned his underwear inside out, so there was no reason for the agent to suspect anything hinky was going on. The agent's eyes narrowed. He asked for John's passport, but the jaundiced inmate pictured in the booklet didn't look like the cherubic Paul Bunyan figure that stood in front of him.
What brings you here to Chicago?
He was stumped there. John didn't know squat about Chicago. All he knew were the Blackhawks and
The Untouchables.
The Untouchables, starring Robert Stack as Elliot Ness.
And that was it. John had reached the depth of his Chicago knowledge. He knew sports and he knew TV, and not much else. The agent called for his supervisor. The duo re-examined John's passport. They again looked him up and down.
Canada.
The supervisor exclaimed.
Yep.
John said, still keeping his sunny disposition. The supervisor looked back up at John.
So what do you like in the playoffs?
Well, if there was something John knew something about, it was hockey. Who did he like in the NHL playoffs? Well, he was a Toronto boy, but Toronto had already lost 4-0 to Philadelphia, which left the Montreal Canadiens, who were the Norris Division champions that year. But the answer was obvious.
The Blackhawks.
The Blackhawks. You're in Chicago, and the customs agents ask you who you like in the playoffs. The answer is Chicago. And with that, he was through. Tribalism had won the day. John threw his duffel bag over his shoulder and walked into the arrivals gate of O'Hare Airport to be greeted by Joyce Sloan from Second City. From Knockabout Media, I'm Ryan Barnett, and this is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood North. This is the second episode in our new mini-series on the life and work of John Candy, our patron saint of laughter. In our last episode, John navigated childhood after the untimely death of his father. A chance run-in, literally, with a talent agent got him his first commercial gig, and he was tricked into auditioning for the new Second City Toronto company. This is episode 2, Johnny Toronto. While his friends and contemporaries Dan Aykroyd, Valerie Bromfield, Gilda Radner, Jane Eastwood, and Jerry Salzberg toiled to get the fledgling Second City Toronto off the ground, 22-year-old John Candy had been sent to train with the main company in Chicago. Almost immediately after clearing customs, he found himself in the Second City Theater, watching from the wings as Bill Murray, Betty Thomas, Jim Stahl, and Ann Ryerson slayed a packed audience. Self-doubt creeped into John's thoughts. He began to tell himself, I can never do this. I can't fit in with these guys. It was at that moment that Del Close, Second City director, leaned over like a little devil on John's shoulder and whispered in his ear, "You'll be doing this Wednesday night." By all accounts, the first night John was on stage, he blended into the backdrop. He was undisciplined, nervously paddling just to keep his head above water. At one point, when the lights went dark and the cast scattered off stage, John ran smack into Jim's stall, splitting his lip in the collision. But John had no time to treat his injury. He was due on stage to introduce the next sketch. As the lights came up, John was standing center stage with blood running from his lip, down his chin, and pooling on his t-shirt in a widening patch of deep crimson, even before John started to speak. Titters from the crowd turned into laughter. The more John bled, it seemed, the harder the crowd laughed. And as he spoke, they laughed still more. John was no stranger to the laughter of a crowd. He had done 2 tours of duty in children's theater, after all. He just wasn't used to crowd laughter at this pitch. It was intoxicating. He had found what he had been looking for since he was a kid. A place to belong. And that place was the Second City main stage. After the show that night, John was approached by his castmate, Bill Murray. Bill had followed in the footsteps of his older brother Brian and auditioned for Second City. While Brian Doyle Murray was in the Great White North helping bring the Toronto troupe to fruition, younger brother Billy was promoted. In fact, he and John tread the boards on the main stage for the first time in the same week. Bill slapped John on the back.
The hell of a save, Johnny Toronto.
John had bled for the show, and in Murray's estimation, that made him a pro.
Come on,
Murray said from beneath his bushy black mustache.
you want to get a stack of pancakes?
In preparation for his residency at Second City, Chicago, John had packed for just 2 weeks. Now, months into his stay, he invited his girlfriend Rose to join him. The two made a home in a fully furnished apartment, for which John had spared no expense.
Candy is a guy who, when I was in the Second City with him in Chicago, ordered carpeting and drapes over the phone from one of those late night TV things. They said 3 rooms for $199. They ended up coming in and saying, oh, $199. That pretty much just gives you like gray felt. He spent $1,200 on carpeting and lime carpeting and drapes, gold drapes. And Candy's a guy who always has a gold cigarette lighter and no money in his pocket.
With regular stage time, John's skills as a performer sharpened, and soon enough, he became a main stage favorite for audiences. During his downtime, John allowed Bill to show him Chicago. He knew how to tie one on, old Johnny Toronto. He and Murray would close down bars, keeping the good times rolling well past last call, well past closing time, and sometimes till dusk. John even caught his first case of sunstroke while at Wrigley Field. No doubt the result of a cocktail of beer, cigarettes, sun, and as John would say about his days in Chicago, DRUGS. And just as Chicago was becoming Candy's town, he was called back home to Canada. He had been sent to the Windy City as a promising newcomer, and over that year, he had become a formidable comedic performer. And Second City, Toronto needed him. While John Candy was in Chicago, Second City, Toronto had opened and shuttered after just 5 months in operation, the result of having no AC, no publicity, no liquor license, and thus no audience. But it wasn't closed for long, because a budding impresario named Andrew Alexander stepped in, buying the rights from Bernie Solins for just $1. With the help from investors, Alexander was able to reopen the theater in a new space, the old Fire Hall, a junky beer hall at 110 Lombard Street. As part of the deal, Bernie Solins remained in place as the creative director. Their plan for remaining open this time? Get a liquor license, and get John Candy on that stage. The relaunched Second City Toronto cast included John, Gilda Radner, Eugene Levy, Joel Flaherty, and Rosemary Radcliffe. In its first incarnation, Second City Toronto had been a carbon copy of its sister troupe out of Chicago. Under the guidance of Solins, Flaherty, and Brian Doyle Murray, they had stuck close to the tried and true, restaging sketches originated and road-tested by earlier company troupes. And thus, there wasn't much about the show that was uniquely Canadian. This would change with the relaunch. As the troupe grew in confidence, they began to infuse their shows with a little maple flavor. As Martin Ellman notes in his biography on John Candy, during this period in the early 1970s, Canadian theatre was, quote, dominated by naturalistic plays about troubled families. Plays like David French's Leaving Home and Of the Fields Lately, and David Freeman's Creeps and You're Going to Be All Right, Jamie Boy. These were wrought, sobering dramas taken very seriously by the theatre crowd. So what better target for parody from a gang of unserious upstarts? The sketch entitled You're Going to Be All Right, You Creep, Leaving Home and All, eh? Takes place during a tense family dinner. In it, Joe Flaherty played a tyrannical Scottish patriarch. Eugene Levy played the family's gay son, and Gilda Radner, the daughter with an intellectual disability. Rosemary Radcliffe played the put-upon mom, trying to keep the peace in the household. And John rounded out the cast as Johnny, the all-Canadian hockey player in the family. The sketch was later restaged for television as part of SCTV.
Big Eddie hit Ma. Say you're sorry.
I'm not gonna say I'm sorry.
Come on, just say you're sorry.
Get over to the table and we'll finish our meal, Johnny. Come
Say
on.
you're sorry.
You get over to the table and finish your meal, or you get the hell out.
All right, I'll get the hell out and I'll take everyone with me. Come on, let's go.
Let's go.
Come on. We're gonna be all right, you creep. Leaving home and all. Hey.
As a sketch, You're Going to Be All Right, You Creep, Leaving Home and All, eh? Is a skeleton key for the kind of comedy this group of players would become known for in the years to come. Absurd, incisive satire of popular culture's output, especially those they deemed as self-serious. The audiences started small at the old fire hall. On particularly slow nights, John would even pull patrons out of line outside the neighboring disco and convince them to see live comedy instead. But regardless of what happened in the box office from night to night, on stage, the natural chemistry of the troupe began to produce something very special. And when you're great, opportunities will follow. Since getting back up on its feet, there was a buzz that began to develop around the Second City crew. Toronto casting directors started attending the shows, having been tipped off to the group of talent working out of the old fire hall. This led to John, Joe Flaherty, and Second City newcomers Dave Thomas and Catherine O'Hara appearing in local commercials for car dealerships or sales at Simpson's department store.
Gee, a lot going for you, understand? Uh-huh. A lot.
In the spring of 1974, Trevor Evans, a senior producer at CBC Television, was tasked with creating a new after-school comedy program for kids. At that time, CBC's children's programming leaned on the side of wholesome. Shows like Razzle Dazzle, Mr. Dress-Up, and The Friendly Giant was what they were producing for kids. The brass wanted to shake things up. They wanted a show that kids found funny, not a quality you found in your typical episode of The Friendly Giant.
Here we are inside. Here's one little chair for one of you and a bigger chair for two more to curl up in. Someone who likes to rock, a rocking chair in the middle. Here, now, look up. Way up. And I'll call Rusty.
So,
Rusty?
they turned to Evans,
Hi, Rusty.
who then was running Wayne and Schuster, the biggest comedy show on the network at that time. Hell, maybe of all time.
The Speaker of the House is going to be wearing sequins? It worked for Liberace.
Whereas Wayne and Schuster were for your parents, or even your grandparents, Evans was on the hunt for young comedic talent for a new generation, and this hunt led him to the old fire hall. After seeing a performance at Second City, Evans invited the cast to audition for his new series. Dr. Zonk and the Zunkins was a half-hour sketch comedy series. The show was centered around a 9-year-old boy, Billy Meeks, played by Robin Evanson. Billy sends away for a computer he sees advertised in a comic book. And in a kind of weird science twist, he ends up creating 2 robots, collectively known as Zunkins. The Zunkins then introduce Billy to a cast of zany characters. Lost yet? Premiering on CBC on September 23, 1974, Dr. Zonk and the Zunkins aired 3 days a week after school. Zany is how Trevor Evans described it in an interview with the Windsor Star.
We try for a Monty Python flair, but it's not as mental as Python. We're more visual.
The Zunkins were puppeteered by John Stalker and Nina Keogh. Stalker later enjoyed a prodigious career as a voiceover artist. Here's just a sample of the roles he voiced.
My name is Newton Gimmick, but everybody just calls me Gimmick.
We'll have to keep our eyes open, Thompson. Oh! Thompson? Yeah, Thompson. I'm downstairs already.
Toad, take it easy.
Come on, Koopa Stoopa. I'm not afraid. What do you think?
Egg, if you move the thingy back up the number line to lower numbers, the beat slows down.
So one is the lowest.
And slowest.
In one voice, I personally quote on a regular basis.
Oh, I'm so bad.
Stalker's fellow Zunkin, Nina Kyo, whose career includes Groundling Marsh, Book Mice, Mr. Dressup, Sesame Street, and of course, she played Muffy in 89 episodes of today's special.
Jeff and Jody said okay when I asked them if you could stay. You don't have to fly away.
She also recently produced the documentary Mr. Dressup, The Magic of Make-Believe, which won the People's Choice Award at TIFF 2023. Rounding out the cast of non-puppet performers were Second City's Rosemary Radcliffe, Gilda Radner, and of course, John Candy. For John, Dr. Zonk was the opportunity he was looking for. He'd been doing well, making a name for himself in Toronto as a live performer, but TV meant a whole lot more exposure and money. As a cast member at Second City, John was pulling in $160 a week, hardly enough for he and Rose to live on, especially given John's penchant for picking up the tab. It was said of John that you couldn't even buy him a beer. He was a quick draw with cash, and if you somehow outwitted him and managed to pay the bartender first, John would accept under only one condition.
You can get the beer. I'm grabbing a round of whiskeys.
John and the others stood to make $200 a day working on Dr. Zonk. Not a fortune, but to Rosemary, Gilda, and John, it was a windfall. The entire first season of Dr. Zonk was shot over a 10-week period. So, in that 10 weeks, John earned the equivalent of 62 weeks of his Second City salary. But it wasn't just about money, and it wasn't just about exposure. TV was more than a rung on John's professional ladder. TV was home. TV was family.
TV's the best dad there is.
And in much the same way that two-reeler comedies were Buster Keaton's medium, or Jack Benny had mastered comedy for radio, John Candy's medium was TV, and Dr. Zonk would lead to other gigs in youth-oriented programming, like Cucumber.
Oh, this is my party outfit. You see, actually I'm a meteorologist. Someone who studies the weather.
Working in TV allowed John to continue on performing with the Second City. In the spring of 1975, John and a splinter group of Second City performers traveled down to California to perform a show called Alterations While You Wait. The company was trying to open a chapter in Pasadena. John frequently went back and forth between Ontario and California. He liked the Golden State. Maybe, he thought, if he frequented California enough, he'd be discovered at a soda fountain. It happened to Lana Turner. Why not John Candy? John and Danny Aykroyd would drive back and forth together.
I vividly remember the 43 hours we took to drive from Toronto to Los Angeles, and it was like the beginning of our dreams, And we played old music, we sang, and talked, and wrote routines, and focused in on what we were going to do when we got older and where we wanted to go.
And it was on one of those trips that Danny received the phone call of a lifetime. Sometime earlier, he and Gilda had auditioned for a new sketch comedy show.
I have some interesting personal news for men. A very personal male product. Lloyd Manganero Deltoid Spray.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Gilda Radner.
Gilda Radner.
As this phone call confirmed, they had both booked it. While John was already on a show that helped bankroll these trips to LA, he couldn't help but catch a sinking feeling. He was happy for Dan and Gilda, but thought he might have just missed out on the most important opportunity in any of their careers. Because this show wasn't with CHCH or CBC. This show was with NBC, and his friends were moving to New York City.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Next time on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood North.
There were 6 people who loved to watch television, but they didn't like what they saw. So they decided to do something about it. Armed with determination and a strong will to change the course of television, they wrote their own shows, classy shows. But they knew that wasn't enough. They had to sell them. Letting nothing stand in their way, they went straight to the networks. But the networks just weren't ready for them. Not NBC, not CBS, not even ABC. But did that stop them? No, they built their own network, SCTV, and they liked what they saw. But they weren't the only people watching. Yes, SCTV was on the air.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood North is written and hosted by me, Ryan Barnett, co-produced by Sonia Jamidi, and recorded by Tyler Rauman at the Community Digital Arts Hub. This series features additional voices by Matt Barnett and Sean Quinlan as John Candy. Our series artwork is by Dmitry Bondarenko. If you like our show, I hope you'll consider helping us grow. You can tell a friend who you think might like the series, drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or follow us on your favorite podcast app. Truly, all of these things really help the show get noticed. Also consider following Knockabout Media on Instagram, Blue Sky, or Substack, where we'll be posting additional content for all of our series. Links are in the show notes. And I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with a new episode. But until then, thanks for listening.
A Knockabout Media original. All done.